Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the Senate elections, obviously, who will be the next chairman, politics of alliances happening. Let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today for the conversation, we have Anjum Ibrahim, and along with her, we've got Javeed, Rana Saab, regular on our shows. Thank you very much for being here. Ma'am, I'll start with you. If you could just give us an overview of the significance of the post of the chairman's Senate. What is his role, and why is it so important for various political parties to hope that it's their man?
That's a tough question, because if you look at the Senate and the output of the Senate, you will find that the chairman's Senate is kind of more ceremonial in a way. However, with Raza Rabbani, there was a lot of effort. He made a lot of effort, and I think quite effectively, to make some changes, to force even the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, to come and explain some of the things and to brief the senators. So it is what the individual makes it. I think it is not quite, it can remain ceremonial, but if an individual wants to strengthen the role of the Senate, then he or she can. So in my opinion, it should be strengthened because it is the upper house and it has got more educated people. It is supposedly can be more philosophical in that way, can deal with a lot more issues in a more academic manner if it wants. But again, the decision has been taken by the leader, and therefore I think it is very important to select the right man. That's
Rana Saab, what's your opinion?
I agree with her. It has been ceremonial. I think before Raza Rabbani, situation was very different. And the tradition has been that most of the chairmen, they were elected with consensus by most of the political party. But now situation has changed altogether. Raza Rabbani, I think credit goes to him to make this otherwise ceremonial post as making presence of Senate felt in many quarters. He invited the army chief, and then there was what we used to call it a dialogue between the state institutions. So, and then he made it sure that the ministers from the government, they are there to respond to the questions which have been asked by the senators. And they, early on, they used to ignore all those questions, and they used to skip their presence from the Senate. And also, you might recall that the Deputy Chairman Senate, he was not given visa by the Americans in a manner that was perceived to be a bit humiliating. And he took it on. And whenever Pakistan was in crisis in the regional situation, Raza Rabbani used to take on Americans, coming up with the statements which were reflecting the public sentiments. And since I've been receiving calls from the RT, Ration Today, and they were asking me who this man is all about, why he's been giving such a strong statement, something they also liked. So Raza Rabbani basically raised the stature of the post of the Chairman Senate. And now that is the reason that he was acceptable for Jamaat-e-Islami, for JUI, for the ruling party, but unfortunately not acceptable by Asif Zardari within the People's Party. That has been very unfortunate. And I foresee that the Asif Zardari and the People's Party are going to be net loser. Not necessarily, even if they win these elections, but now within the party there is a division, and the strong opinion is that those strong voices within the party are being suppressed because Zardari Sahab basically wants to please establishment. So again, we now have two options. And if Raja Zafrul Haq makes it, the probability is there because Jamaat-e-Islami has announced they are going to support him. I think in one way or the other, he is going to retain that tradition.
All right. We've also been joined by Afra Sayab Khatak Saab. He's on the line with us. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Sir, what is your reading of the Senate elections? Who is your hopeful candidate for this post? And what else would you like to share about the workings of the Senate?
Well, Senate is a very important institution because being upper house in a federal system, it is going to represent all the provinces or federating units on equal basis. This time round, unfortunately, the situation that has emerged is quite complicated, and the competition is not really something that one would have expected, because everybody thought Mr. Raza Rabbani was a very deserving candidate, and he had wide support across the party lines. But unfortunately, his candidature did not materialize. So it's a very close competition. I think it will, in half an hour or so, we'll come to know as to who has won it. But I think it's going to be very tough and close call.
So thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World. Well, coming back to the studio, we have two major candidates now in the running, and that is one is from Quetta, or rather Balochistan. That would be Mr. Sarjani, and the other one is Raja Zafarul Haq. So in your opinion, ma'am, first, in your opinion, who do you think is a stronger candidate? And secondly, what kind of an impact will the Senate elections really have on the general elections when they come around?
I think that what is happening in the Senate is with Raja Zafarul Haq, the selection of Raja Zafarul Haq and Sadiq Sanjani. These selections are not based on I think they were based on the fact that they were both electables. It was not the party leaders' probably first choice. As we know, Asif Ali Zardari wanted Salim Manviwala, who's now standing up for the deputy post. This was not, neither of the candidates were the first selection of the party leader. And it is unfortunate, but the party leaders are the ones who select who is going to be the chair. And they then direct their members in Senate to select that person, that particular individual. Yeah. Now, because it's a secret ballot, nobody knows, so people can, you know,
they can change their opinion. They
can change their opinion, and there'll be no way they can find out who did it, so that they can take appropriate action against that person. So, unfortunately, for this particular, what can be a very important position, it's a selection by one person, one individual. In the case of Mr. Sanjani, I think that Imran Khan trumped Mr. Zardari, I think, for the first time in negotiations, and he insisted on somebody from Quetta. So Asif Zardari had to withdraw his nomination of Salim Manviwala. Now, a lot of I think my colleague here has talked about Raza Rabbani being the much better candidate, and that he would have definitely won. But I think if that had happened, and I'm not talking about Raza Rabbani and Asif Zardari's supposed not getting on very well with each other, for the Rabbani not being answerable to Zardari as much as he probably wanted. What I'm talking about is the fact that had Raza Rabbani won, then it would have been a big face saving for Nawaz Sharif, perhaps not as much for Zardari. And so for him, politically, so for him to have suggested or to have agreed to Raza Rabbani, irrespective of how he conducted the Senate while he was the chairman and how well or badly he did it, irrespective of that. So for me, that was a very key element in Zardari's decision. Now, he wanted, obviously, a Pakistan People's Party man, and he wanted Salim Manviwala, who was a former finance minister, and whether we like it or not, and whether he was there for a few days or whatever, the fact remains that he does have some kind of a stature because of that. He also has been extremely active in the Senate committee, the chair, he's the chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, and he has been extremely vocal about that. So he may have been, or he may have proved, to be a good chairman. But having said that, Sanjani is from Balochistan. There is some basic rationale for having somebody from Balochistan for the first time ever, though I'm sure that we are all aware that the Baloch Sardars rarely, if ever, pass on what is given to them in terms of even development funds onto their own people, and that there is a lot of corruption going on there, and there's a lot of, maybe it's changing, but extremely slowly. So, so a Baloch chairman may or may not be fully supported by the people of Balochistan, and I believe some of the Baloch senators are not supporting Sanjani. I mean, Achakzai's party is not, and you know, so there also politics is coming into play.
Rana sir, what is the significance of the results of this particular Senate chairman election on the upcoming general elections? How is it going to affect them?
I think it involves the political future of three leaders, Asif Zardari, Imran Khan, and Nawaz Sharif. For Asif Zardari, it was not less than a gamble, because in case he loses, that means he could be possibly isolated within the party. Bilawal could take on the charge. And I think it is going to also hurt his future wheeling and dealing plans, because he has emerged more as a wheeler and dealer than as a politician. And the second,
isn't that what politicians do?
That's right. I mean, if you
wheeling
define
and dealing
a politician, that's right.
is the pure, you know, basic definition of a politician is a wheeler and dealer.
The scale at which he
But
has...
can I just, sorry, can I just say something? The Senate reflects the strength of the National Assembly and the provincial assemblies which are elected.
Right.
It does not mirror it, if you know what I mean. I mean, the Senate elections will not have too much of an impact on what's happening in the general elections, but what happens in the general elections
has more of an impact on the Senate elections.
That's right.
The scale at which he has carried out his wheeling and dealing, that has been blamed by the other political parties, that he has been engaged in horse trading. MQM has been complaining, and PTI complained in KPK. And in Balochistan, obviously the ruling party was the victim. And we don't know what is going to be the election results now and who is going to be the next victim. And then I think he's also being perceived that he's more hands in glove with the establishment. And he's into sort of in a drawing room politics. So his future, his own individual future, is going to be determined by these elections. And the third is obviously former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He wanted Raza Rabbani, not because he loved him the way he conducted the House during last couple of years, but he's the one, he thought that he has a credibility. If he speaks against the establishment, if he speaks against the judges, those voices would be heard, and that is what he badly needs him. So I think part of the reason was that the many leaders from the People's Party, they said that actually Nawaz Sharif basically he possibly, Raza Rabbani could have been candidate of the People's Party, but by saying that Nawaz Sharif wanted it, that jeopardized his case. I don't agree with that notion, but I think Nawaz Sharif is going to be the net loser or gainer as to who's going to emerge from this election. But at the same time, we should not forget that Raja Zafar Haq is not Raza Rabbani. He represents more right wing. And I think part of the reason Jamaat Islami announced to vote for him, because he represents their credentials, and he's not going to displease establishment. So there is going to be convergence of ideological inclinations between the establishment and Raja Zafar Haq and also Islamist party. So he may not address the political agenda of ousted Prime Minister the way Raza Rabbani could have possibly done out of his ideological inclination. His ideological inclinations are matching somewhere else.
All right. That's a very interesting analysis. Now, let's talk about the merits of both candidates when they face off against each other. Who has more credibility? Who would you be voting for, really, if these were the two candidates that you were presented with?
I think I would not have, maybe I would have abstained. And again, the reason is because I think that their selection is not based on merit or on an assessment of how good or how bad they will perform in the Senate. I think it is based on the party leader's perception of what he can or cannot deliver for the party leader. I agree fully with my colleague, with Rana Saab here, and the reason is that you know, for the fact that it is imperative for Nawaz Sharif to get the chairmanship, because he would have a voice in the Senate on a regular basis. It is reported regularly.
Let's talk about the fact that what kind of strength does the PMLN, which is the ruling party at the moment, have in terms of having their person elected? Do you think, because everybody seems to think that it's going to be a very close contest, what do you attribute the reasons for that to?
It's just the alignment of parties, PPP and PTI. I think the alignment was very, as I said before, cleverly manipulated for the first time by Imran Khan. I think he trumped Zardari Saab for the first time. With respect to the PML Nawaz, now they should have been in a much stronger position, because, as you know, if you are in government, you can deliver a lot. But Nawaz Sharif's narrative, anti-establishment narrative, and his daughter's narrative, now quite openly expressed almost every day, is something that has scared a lot of people, and not only in, as you said, it has scared people in the PPP or whatever, but I think it's also scared people within the PML Nawaz, and that is where his weakness lies. That even if Zafrul Haq, even if his selection wins and becomes the chairman, would he be able or willing to continue to do what Nawaz Sharif is doing in Jalsas, as establishment bashing? But at the same time, there are unconfirmed reports, as there always are, that there are people who are engaging in dialogue with the establishment, and not Shahbaz Sharif, but Nawaz Sharif's, those who are very close to Nawaz Sharif are already engaging in dialogue. So it's a two-pronged strategy that he's doing. I feel that what he does outside in his narrative and his daughter's narrative is something that has kept him relevant to this point. How long can he make it relevant once he passes on the mantle of the presidency to his brother? I mean, so far I think he's still acting. I think tomorrow is the elections for party for the president. From acting to full president. His relevance will remain then, partly because of his narrative, it is remaining quite there, but at the same time, he needs his own man, somebody who owes loyalty to him. But then don't forget that there were a lot of people who owed loyalty to him, and once Musharraf came, a lot of them just kind of dumped him and went their own way. You have people like Mushahid Hussain, who's come back into the fold. You have people even like Ishaq Dar, whether it was torture or not, we don't know. The case is in court, but the 43-page...
I'm glad you brought up Mr. Ishaq Dar, because apparently he has also become a senator. But he has not taken oath.
Not taken oath, so therefore he's not eligible to
and therefore
to vote.
That would be lost to the PML.
Right, so
they would have won the elections if
Mr. Ishaq Dar was allowed to vote, then he would have obviously...
legally speaking, he's an absconder.
So how could he become the senator?
That is a very precise question which Supreme Court has raised. The petition has already landed with the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is going to adjudicate on this. And they have raised the same point that somebody who is an absconder, he loses his all legal rights. So he doesn't have the legal right to contest Senate elections. I think he's going to be deseated before he could possibly have taken the oath. That is not going to happen. And that is a net loss to the PMLN. And I would not be surprised if any group wins with the margin of just one vote. It's a going to be toughest ever contest in the history of the Senate. One vote margin or the two vote margins means that it is quite unpredictable. But again, here I think some of the senators, they are going to cast vote on the basis of the credentials of the candidates. And particularly Raja Zafrul Haq, because he's been running the House as a leader of the House. He has been in touch with so many other senators, particularly from the right-wing senators. So I think that advantage he has. But again, it's a big game of make and break. It's a power politics. I mean, we have heard so much that it is actually to give voice to Balochistan. That is just for the public consumption. These politicians, they use it as a sort of justification to further their political vested interest. no one is as much sincere with the Balochistan as they are trying to pose. I really disagree when they say, no, actually we want Balochistan's voices to be heard. Senate chairman is not an executive authority. He is not going to direct officials to donate more funds or do something on the same pattern. So Senate election, by and large, I think they are going to leave behind two messages. The scale of the horse trading has gained a proportion which was never witnessed in the history of Pakistan. And the second, that who's going to propagate in what manner after the election results, particularly if the ruling party wins, they would say that despite horse trading, despite their backing from the establishment, we have won, and that reflects our public support. We know that doesn't represent the public support, but they are going to propagate on those lines, and vice versa.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation. So thank you very much. Hang in there and just take a short break. We'll be right back and talk further about the importance of the Senate elections. Welcome back after the break. We're in conversation with Javeed, Rana and Anjum Ibrahim about the Senate elections. We also have an understanding that being the ruling party, the PMLN does have the majority in the House, but that is not an absolute majority. And if you could talk a bit about the way the Senate elections play out and what happens if it's sort of a hung parliament or a decision which is, you know, hanging in the balance by just one vote. How does it play out and how does it affect the overall functioning of the Senate?
What happens in the Senate is that half of the membership is retired after every 3 years. It's a 6-year term, but after every 3 years, half retire. So what effectively happened is that the Pakistan People's Parties lost a lot of their candidates because a lot of them retired, whereas PML Nawaz did not. And if you look at the new senators, only 15 from PML Nawaz won, while 12 of PPP won. So the difference that you see between 20 and 33 is effectively the number of retirees, as it were, you know.
Right.
So that one thing. But before I answer your question, I'd like to say one thing about Ishaq Dar, and which we were discussing before the break. And about him, I would say that yes, and how can an absconder, as you rightly said, how can an absconder be elected as a senator, which is an extremely respected office, even if he drew his power from other sources. I think his case can easily be dismissed, you know, I mean, in the fact that he can't really stand for elections, is that he actually opened a bank account in Pakistan, in the National Bank, I think National Bank of Pakistan, and his friend is
President of the National Bank.
Yeah, he's appointed him there. So that is something that is not allowed to anybody, you know. Even if you had an account with one bank, and then you closed it and then want to reopen it, you cannot unless you are physically present. And so he violated a process And in a court of law, if you violate a process, it's easier to
be disqualified.
to be disqualified. So
as a result.
I think that yes, I think he did that, and that was I would be very surprised if the court rules that he can remain a senator. But having said that, if the PML Nawaz wins again or is re-elected, then he can unfortunately still be the finance minister of this country.
I doubt that he would be again prime finance minister.
Sorry?
Case against him is pretty strong.
Well, having said that, let's talk about the condition of the PMLN itself, its strength in the Senate, and how is that going to help them, let's say, in the upcoming elections. I've asked this before as well, but if you could, explain it a little better for us.
PMLN is obviously the single largest party in the Senate. That means that it is short of at least 19 votes or 20 votes. They need more to have simple majority, which it doesn't have. This means the legislation is going to be quite disruptive in coming months and years. That means that there are going to be more political groups, more alliances within the Senate, and that means it is going to be on case-to-case basis. Unlike National Assembly, the situation is going to remain very different. PMLN, despite possibly having their own chairman, they would not be able to get through their legislation. Last time, what happened in the case of the president, when there was clause of the president was actually removed, then it was because of the fact that there was absence of so many senators from the opposition parties, and PMLN availed that opportunity, and they managed to pass through the legislation. I think the opposition parties, they are going to be more on alert, because the former Prime Minister badly needs some sort of legislation where he can stage comeback, maybe as a party head, maybe try to create a situation where he can possibly take on judges. So opposition has been saying that is why we want our own chairman. I think in a broader picture, the point that you have raised on how far this is going to have an impact on the general elections, no impact at all. Because what we have seen in terms of the number of the senators who have emerged from different political parties, that is on the basis of the last general elections held in 2013. So what we are seeing now, that is reflecting the public sentiments of back in 2013. How far they have gone against the ruling party or otherwise, we don't know. This is still an open-ended question. Senate elections are going to provide some some material to the both opposition and the government, depending who is going to win, whereby they can propagate that represent public sentiments. That is not the case. I think elections, we still don't know which political party is going to win, because public sympathies, or the word that we usually use, that has yet to emerge, whereby we can say that one particular party from the opposition or the government is going to win.
All right, we're going to take a short break over here, and when we return, we'll continue on conversation, and hopefully we'll also have an inclination of where the election itself is heading. So take a short break, we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still talking about the Senate elections. Still no results have officially been declared. The process itself is underway, and we're hoping that we will have the winner of the Senate chairman's elections very soon. But we're in conversation with Rana Javeed Saab and Anjum Ibrahim. Anjum, if you could also talk about Mr. Raza Rabbani as a candidate. We have spoken about him, and you also mentioned that he has raised the stature of the chairman posts itself. How would you rate the various chairman senates we've had over the years and about their role?
Okay, this is a very tough question because I really don't remember the role that the others played, other than the fact that the role was minimal and that they never, sort of impacted made any impact on me. Raza Rabbani did, mainly because, as Rana Sabri just mentioned, that he had this chief of army staff coming in that was unprecedented. He also made some remarks about anti-establishment remarks, which were quite open.
Anti-US,
anti-United States remarks. There was one thing that he did which I was not quite happy with. He went to Karachi, was not given protocol, and was extremely furious. That reminded me of some other people that we've had. But apart from that, he was anti-establishment. I think that was, I think, his main, his main
thrust.
And main thrust. And he was not shy about being anti, administration. And I appreciate that. There are a lot of us who have challenged that role repeatedly. There are many of us who argue that the establishment should stay away from politics, should not engage in the business of selections of politicians. We've all gone through that. But the point that I want to make about Raza Rabbani is that he, to some extent, by failing to keep his own party leader on board, was not that politic. Because if you want, we all manipulate our roles. If we want a promotion, we undertake some actions, and so that we get a reaction, so that we can sort of strengthen our position. He did not do that, and while some people would admire him, others would think that it was not quite a sensible thing to do if he wanted to be re-elected. Zardari Saab, as a party leader, I think was justified to quite a great extent, because he made Raza Rabbani the chairman. Without Asif Ali Zardari, he could not have been. And Asif Ali Zardari, for whatever we may personally think of him, he did deliver for this particular individual. And without his support and without his manipulation,
there was little difference.
There was no possibility. And he has remained in the party, which is headed, I think, I disagree to some extent with you that Bilawal may take over and stuff. I think as long as Asif Zardari is there, probably not. He is the indisputed leader. He takes all major decisions, and now, lately he backed off, especially with respect to supporting Sanjani instead of Salim Mandviwala, because there was no way that he could otherwise have gotten any votes.
Well, let's also talk about the post of the deputy chairman. How is that important? And then you also mentioned...
That's even less so.
So what is the thing with Salim Mandviwala for the post of deputy chairman? Is that sort of a second prize, a consolation prize being given to him? Because
we are not sure that he is going to get it.
Right.
Because MKM says that we are going to vote for Sadiq Sanjani, but we would not vote for the People's Party's candidates. I think.
Well, the voting has finally been completed, and now we are in the process of the votes being counted.
Wow,
so hopefully we should have a result by the end of our program. You can also see the visuals on the TV screen where the speaker, the acting speaker at the moment,
Yaqub Nasser.
Mr. Yaqub Nasser is...
So the counting has finished, or the
counting, I think, is
ongoing, okay.
Has started. We've been joined by our correspondent, Shabir Wagra, who's covering this Senate election. Let's get the latest updates from him. Shabir, if you could Kindly update us as to what is transpiring in the Senate at the moment.
Waqas, right now, all the 103 members of Senate, they have casted their votes, and voting for the chairman Senate has stopped, and now the presiding officer, Sardar Yaqub Nasser, who casted his vote, the last one, and now he has asked both the candidates and for the chairman of that they should send their representatives so that the counting can be started. And now counting will be started, and we can expect the result because it is only one vote, two candidates and 103 votes. So we can expect the result within next 10 to 15 minutes. And the first vote was casted by Abdul Karim, and the last vote by Yaqub Nasser, and 103 senators casted their vote because 104th one, Senator Ishaq Dar, could not take vote because he is abroad, and he's not in the country. And both the candidates now, once this chairman election results will be announced, then chairman will take oath from the presiding officer, and he will preside over the session for the election of deputy chairman, which will take place later on.
All right. What is the mood in the Senate, Shabir, since you're there? What sort of essence of the mood can you really discern being there?
Waqas, I am here since morning, and I would talk to almost the leadership and the candidates and the voters, like senators of both sides, and both sides are very, there is high tension on both sides because it is a very, very close race. Even all the leaders are saying that this is the closest in the history of Senate of Pakistan, and it is a matter of 1, 2, or 3 votes up and down which will decide. Even you can ask, few are saying that it would be 1 or 2 votes which will decide who will be the chairman of Senate from either side. So government side, they realize they are confident that they have a simple majority, like 52 votes required for to be elected as the chairman. They are asking that they have the required majority. Same is from the opposition side. But one thing is very dramatic which took place, that MQ and Pakistan, they have announced that they will vote for the opposition candidate Sadiq Sajani for chairman, but they will not vote for the People's Party deputy chairman Salim Manjiwala, and they may abstain from voting during the deputy chairman election, but right now they voted for the chairman election.
All right, Shabir, we'll be getting in touch with you soon to find out the results of the election, hopefully. It'll happen before the end of our program. That was our correspondent, Javeed reporting from the Senate, giving you a live update. Let's talk about the two main contenders. First of all, Raja Zafarul Haq versus Mr. Saqib Sanjarani. What are their credentials when compared against each other? One is relatively young, the other one is a very old and experienced politician. What's your opinion of the contestants themselves?
I always support new people. I think that the old have more experience and they have more of a historical perspective. But having said that, do we need that right now in the Senate? I think what we need is some bold decisions. I think what we need is some bold and some measures that need to be taken. Raza Rabbani went ahead and took some decisions. He insisted on attendance. He insisted on being briefed by the establishment, as we were discussing before. So. But at the end of the day, young or old, you need a person, an individual who is willing to leave a mark. I'm not sure whether either of them is willing to, right now, would be able to or willing to leave a mark. Raja Zafarul Haq has obviously a much longer history, which is appreciated by a lot. He obviously was an electable, which is why Nawaz Sharif pushed his name forward. More electable than Pervez Rashid. I think his name was coming up quite a lot, and Mushahid Hussain, who was supposedly the turncoat and who turned coat yet again. You have to put a person in that position before you can actually figure out, because a lot of people, you know, like a lot of the army chiefs, when they come in, it takes them about 5 to 6 months before they begin to sort of feel the position.
Right.
So I think we'll see whoever comes in, if he is willing to leave a mark in history, in Senate history, which is really not that well known in this country anyway, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, let's hope for the best. Rana Sahab, what impact will it have on legislation, considering the makeup of the Senate? There are, you know, there's no really clear majority for any party really. So
less legislation, and that means less initiative from the political parties to do legislation, because you cannot please everybody. Everybody has its own political agenda. You cannot please smaller groups. Now, in a situation where you need 1 vote, 2 votes, 3 votes, so if you come up with a legislation which you think is largely in the public interest, that means it is not going to get through, because that would be probably affecting the political interest of smaller groups. So smaller groups like MKM, like JUI, like JU, Jamaat-e-Islami, they will make their presence felt. The government of that day, if PML then, or maybe because after election we don't know which party is going to emerge as victorious. So I think more blackmailing, I would say, more compromises, more funds to these senators, though legally speaking it doesn't make sense, but it is going to happen. Because when there is a hung parliament, as is exactly the situation right now in the Senate, that means unfortunately we'll be back into 90s when that kind of situation was there. But nonetheless, let's hope that the similar situation does not crop up in the National Assembly. If that happens, I think then there would be more destabilization in Pakistan. We need next elections where people of Pakistan clearly elect a party, if not with thumping majority, then at least with a clear majority. That would mean that a very clear decision they can make. Because you might recall previously MKM used to blackmail People's Party, and they did it. This time around, they could not have done it because the ruling party didn't need their support inside National Assembly. And we have seen the result now that there is a peace in Karachi. So let's hope for the best.
Well, now let's talk about the narrative of resistance that Nawaz Sharif has been touting, you know, in his rallies. Do you think that that narrative is going to get some traction or support from the assemblies or the Senate going forward?
Raja Zafrul Haq probably will support that narrative. I mean, Raza Rabbani was supporting it effectively. I think Raja Zafrul Haq will definitely support it, at least initially. Again, once Shahbaz Sharif takes over, who does not support that narrative, he may believe in it, but he may not support. He certainly does not support it rhetorically in speeches. I think that he will have to change his tune, and he will change his tune according to who leads the party and from where he gets his instructions. I think Raja Zafrul Haq is the kind of leader who will follow instructions. I'm not sure about Sanjani, but I am sure about Raja Zafrul Haq. The other thing I would like to say is that one is not, I mean, again, going from what Rana Saab said, if the legislation is stuck in the Senate or if there is some resistance, then you can call a joint sitting of Parliament, and whichever party, and PML now, right now, has the majority to push any legislation it wants through. However, pushing that legislation, which they did in terms of being the president of the party, did not really bear fruit because it was struck down by the Supreme Court. So there is that check and balance, and that will continue. And if Nawaz Sharif feels that if he has 2/3 majority, he can do what he wants with the constitution, then given the set of apex judiciary judges we have, it may not be all that easy.
Well, I have two rhetorical questions, Rana Saab. Considering Rabbani Saab's legacy that he is leaving behind in the Senate, creating or fostering an atmosphere of debate and dialogue, Do you think that the coming chairman Senate is going to continue in that vein, or do you think that we might be seeing something completely different?
I think if Sadiq wins, then we should forget about it, because he's the man who doesn't have an experience. He's the man who is going to accommodate everybody, and he's the man who take a lot of time to adjust himself into that position. And then this position is also important because the chairman Senate act as an acting president in situation where president leave Pakistan, or he gets sick, or for whatever political reason, if he resigns. So that position is important. In case of Raja Zafrul Haq, I think at least he will enjoy the support of the House. He will try to take along with everybody. He would not pursue the political agenda of Nawaz Sharif, but certainly he would take care of the interest of the ruling party. Now there is a unfortunately distinction. So within the ruling party there is a clear division. So Raja Zafrul Haq is not going to be hostile towards establishment. He has a right-wing credentials, and right-wing credentials, they don't the red line, and I don't think that he would cross the red line.
All right. On a philosophical note, Anjum, if you think the main purpose of the National Assembly or the Senate is really passing legislation and maybe upgrading our laws, which we feel as citizens of this country really need a major overhaul. So do you think that the kind of numbers that, or the kind of distribution of the members that we get to see in the Senate is going to actually help in fixing the laws that need fixing, and maybe enacting legislation that is progressive and for Pakistan's benefit? Because we haven't seen that taking place.
There are a lot of laws that were passed in the during the tenure of PM Nawaz government, the third tenure, the current ongoing tenure. A lot of those laws are extremely relevant. They are extremely well drafted. They are of international standards. However, they are not being implemented. I think the fault with Pakistan lies in lack of implementation of our laws.
What would you attribute that to? What's the reason
like you have money laundering laws. What do I attribute that to? You tell me. There is a political angle to that. Child labor laws. You tell me. What can I attribute it to? Child labor is in one of our major industries, carpet industry. Children are used there. We have excellent environmental laws. Are they being implemented? Hell no, because you have the timber mafia, you have all kinds of things. You have a vision that I want bigger roads, need more roads and motorways, which effectively means cutting down a lot of the trees. So what do I attribute it to? I think monetary interest of those who are in power. There's no other. This is the basic nut in a nutshell. Monetary interests of those with influence, those with power, and unless you break that corruption and that kind of a thing.
That's a very myopic outlook, towards running a state. You cannot have, monetary concerns alone.
But unfortunately, that has been happening with a lot of our laws.